All right, welcome everyone to another deep dive. Today we're going to be taking a closer look at some really important upcoming ballot questions.
Yeah, these are going to directly impact your HOA and your rights as homeowners, so it's definitely worth taking a little time to break them all down.
Absolutely. We've had a ton of you reach out, sharing information about these proposed changes, and I think it's safe to say there are some big decisions on the horizon.
For sure. From potential spending changes to updates to the community's governing documents, it's a lot to digest.
Exactly. But that's what we're here for. We're going to try to unpack all of it.
Help everyone feel confident about casting their votes.
Exactly. Okay, so why don't we just jump right in? We'll start with ballot question 1, which focuses on the HOA's ability to levy fines.
Right now, there's a temporary cap on those fines limited to $300 per year,
Yeah, and this ballot question seeks to make that cap permanent.
which, would prevent a future board from coming in and deciding to impose like some kind of outrageous fines.
Yeah, right, exactly. Like we've heard some concerns about hypothetical scenarios
Yeah.
where they could try to fine $100 per day for something.
Right, and this would protect against that.
Exactly. And it's worth noting that back in 2023, there was already a vote on this same issue.
Yeah, and almost two-thirds of the voters actually approved this $300 annual limit.
So really, this question is about solidifying that homeowner protection, making it a permanent part of the rules.
Right, enshrining it in the CCRs, so to speak.
Precisely. Okay, let's move on to ballot question 2. This one's about when the HOA can actually pursue foreclosure on a property.
Right now, the way Section 5.8 is written in the CCRs, they could technically initiate foreclosure even if an account is just like $1 late.
Yeah, that's a little unsettling to think about.
Yeah, I mean, nobody wants to lose their home over a tiny oversight, right?
Exactly. And it's good to emphasize that we're talking about unpaid assessments, not like those fines we were just discussing or penalties or anything like that.
Right, it's specifically those regular assessments that every homeowner is responsible for.
Exactly. And any foreclosure would always have to go through the proper judicial proceedings. So this proposed change would update Section 5.8 so that foreclosure could only be pursued if the total unpaid assessments are over $2,000.
So it basically raises that threshold, giving homeowners a little more breathing room.
Absolutely. It adds a significant layer of protection for folks who might just hit a rough patch financially.
Yeah, makes it a little less likely to face that worst case scenario because of a minor late payment.
For sure. Okay, on to ballot question 3, which is all about aesthetics. It's about the landscaping at our front entrance.
Right. Always an important topic, right? Curb appeal and all that.
Absolutely. So we've got 3 options laid out here. Option A proposes spending $900 on perennial native bushes and flowers.
So going with something that's a little more self-sustaining, comes back year after year.
Exactly. Requires less maintenance in the long run. Then there's option B, which is to basically stick with what we're doing now, spending $600 each year on those seasonal flowers.
Yeah, the bright and colorful annuals that we're all used to.
Right. And then there's option C, which is the minimalist approach.
Just mowing and keeping things tidy, no flowers at all.
Exactly. So it seems like with option A, there's the potential for some cost savings down the road.
After about 3 years, it could actually end up being less expensive than those annual flowers.
Right. And there's the environmental benefit too, promoting native plants.
So this one's really about weighing those different priorities, aesthetics versus cost versus environmental impact.
Exactly. It's up to the homeowners to decide which factors matter most.
All right, moving on to ballot question 4. This one deals with compensating the folks who volunteer their time to serve on the HOA board.
Right, and whether they should receive any kind of financial reimbursement for their work. Exactly. So, the proposal here is to spend $1,250 annually to provide each board member with $50 per meeting for up to 10 meetings a year.
Yeah, it's kind of like a small token of appreciation, recognizing the effort they put in.
And the rationale provided is that these volunteers are essentially taking on tasks that used to be handled by a management company.
Which, by the way, cost us a lot more. We're talking somewhere between $5,000 and $10,000 per year when we had that management company.
So the argument is that this reimbursement is actually a pretty cost-effective way to ensure we have people willing to serve on the board.
Especially since it seems like we've been having a little trouble attracting volunteers lately.
Right, and to keep up with inflation, there's even a provision for a 2% annual increase in those payments.
So it's kind of a balancing act here, right? Weighing the value of volunteerism against the practical need to compensate people for their time and effort.
Absolutely. Okay, on to a question that I think has pretty clear safety implications. Ballot question 5. This one's about making sure all the houses have easily visible address numbers.
Which, it sounds super basic, but you'd be surprised how many homes don't have clear numbers.
And that can be a huge problem for emergency services. Imagine like an ambulance trying to find your house in the middle of the night.
It's a scary thought.
Yeah, so the proposed change here is to require all homes to display their address numbers on both the house itself and the mailbox.
And this number's got to be between 2 and 6 inches tall.
So nice and visible. Right now, our CCRs don't actually address this at all, which is, I guess, how we ended up with this situation.
So it's a pretty straightforward safety measure, really, just making sure everyone's home can be easily located in an emergency.
All right, moving on to something a little more, shall we say, breezy. Ballot question 6 is about clotheslines.
Ah, the age-old debate. The right to dry your clothes naturally versus the aesthetic concerns.
Precisely. So this proposed change to the CCRs would actually allow homeowners to have clotheslines in their backyards.
Which, a lot of people are in favor of. Saves energy, good for the environment, that kind of thing.
Right. But, of course, there's a caveat. The homeowner must have a 6-foot privacy fence completely enclosing their backyard.
So no hanging laundry out for the whole neighborhood to see.
Exactly. It's about balancing those individual freedoms with maintaining a certain aesthetic standard.
Right, finding that compromise. All right, let's talk about transparency. Ballot question 7 is all about making sure our HOA meetings are open and accessible.
Yeah, about keeping everyone informed about what's going on.
Right, so the proposal here is to allow any member of the HOA to audio or video record both board of directors meetings and general membership meetings.
Now, there's an exception carved out for financial information or anything related to debt. That stuff can't be recorded.
Right, that makes sense. Protect people's privacy, when it comes to sensitive financial details.
Exactly. And the proposal also clearly states that the recordings can't be used to disrupt a meeting or violate anyone's privacy rights.
Right, no using them for nefarious purposes or trying to profit off of them or anything like that.
Exactly. The whole idea is just to create a greater sense of transparency and accountability within the HOA.
Give everyone access to what's being discussed and decided.
All right, now for something a little more festive. Ballot question 8 asks if the HOA should allocate funds for things like Yard of the Month awards and prizes for holiday decorations.
Yeah, it's about adding a little fun and a little friendly competition into the mix.
Exactly. So the proposal is to spend $350 annually on this stuff. Basically, it's about promoting community spirit and encouraging people to take pride in their properties.
Right, and I guess it comes down to whether you think that's a valuable use of HOA funds.
Some folks might see it as frivolous, while others might think it's a great way to build a community. It's all a matter of perspective, I suppose.
For sure. Okay, up next, we've got ballot question 9. This one involves the HOA applying for a grant.
Yeah, a neighborhood matching grant, and it could be worth $10,000.
Not too shabby, but the catch is that we, the HOA, would also need to chip in some money to make these projects happen.
Exactly. So the homeowners get to choose which project they'd prefer. Option A is to build a splash pad.
Which, sounds fun, but it's important to note that this one would likely require us to cough up an additional $10,000 to $20,000 on top of that grant money.
Yeah, so that's a significant chunk of change. Option B is to upgrade the existing dog fence.
The one that's made of wood and has seen better days.
Right, it's getting a little rickety. So this option would involve switching it out for a more durable metal fence.
So this question is really about prioritizing, right? Do we want a brand new amenity, even if it comes with a pretty hefty price tag? Or do we want to focus on improving existing infrastructure?
It's a tough call.
Yeah.
All right, moving on to something that might be a little controversial. Ballot question 10 proposes banning parking on any grassy areas.
Yeah, this one's about maintaining that pristine look, keeping all the vehicles on paved surfaces.
Exactly, so no parking on lawns or landscape areas. Even that strip of grass between the sidewalk and the street would be off limits.
Unless, of course, you've got a car tucked away in your backyard behind a 6-foot privacy fence.
Right, that's the one exception. But otherwise, it's pavement or designated parking areas only.
So I imagine some folks are going to be thrilled about this, keeping things nice and tidy.
While others might see it as an unnecessary restriction, especially if parking is already limited in some areas.
It definitely has the potential to spark some debate.
Okay.
Let's talk about money. Ballot question 11 focuses on the process for approving the HOA's annual budget.
Yeah, and this one has the potential to give homeowners a lot more control over how those funds are allocated.
It would require a majority vote from a quorum of homeowners to approve the budget.
And the board would actually have to present at least two different budget options.
So not just one take it or leave it budget anymore.
Exactly. There would be a bare bones budget, just covering the absolute essentials, and then a standard budget.
Right, and they could even include an optional expanded budget if they wanted to.
The key is that the homeowners would have more choices. And those budget options would have to be sent out to everyone at least 30 days before the vote.
Giving everyone plenty of time to review everything and make an informed decision.
Exactly. And we'd have at least 50 days total for the whole process, so no more rushing things through.
And if none of the budget options get a majority vote,
We'd have a runoff vote. So it's really putting the power in the hands of the homeowners.
this one's all about transparency and giving everyone a real say in how the HOA's finances are managed.
Couldn't agree more. Okay, similar to question 9, ballot question 12 deals with another potential grant opportunity.
Another $10,000 from the city, but this time there are even more options for how to use it.
Yeah, we've got a whole list here. Fencing for the basketball and pickleball court,
New fencing and materials for the pumpkin patch.
a splash pad,
A whole bunch of park upgrades.
like volleyball, soccer, ping pong, maybe even a second swing set.
Or we could go the security route and install cameras in common areas with license plate reading technology.
Yeah, so a lot to consider here. It's all about deciding which projects would be the most beneficial for the community as a whole.
And of course, we've got to keep in mind the splash pad came up earlier, and that one would require some significant additional funding from the HOA.
Right, so we'd have to weigh the appeal of that project against the overall cost.
Okay, now, speaking of security cameras, ballot question 13 directly relates to that last option we were just talking about.
This one's about whether anyone's actually willing to step up and be the point person for those cameras if we do decide to install them.
Yeah, the question makes it very clear that if we don't have a volunteer for this role, the HOA won't even bother with the cameras.
So it's kind of a make or break thing. This volunteer would be responsible for responding to any requests for footage.
Making sure it's only being used for legitimate reasons. Right, like if there's an incident that needs to be investigated, or if the police need evidence for something.
Exactly. And they might even have to coordinate directly with law enforcement sometimes.
So it's not just about having the cameras, it's about having someone who's dedicated to managing them responsibly.
Absolutely. All right, moving on to ballot question 14, which deals with our beloved, or maybe not so beloved, dog fence.
The one that's been slowly falling apart since it was installed back in 2019.
Yeah, it's definitely seen better days. So we've got two options here. Option A is to invest $2,000 to repair it.
Using those sturdy cattle panels, which should hold up a lot better than the existing material.
Option B is to just tear the whole thing down. So basically, do we want to keep the designated dog area, or are we ready to let it go?
It's a question of how much we value that space and whether we think it's worth the cost to fix it.
Exactly. All right, almost to the finish line here. Ballot question 15 deals with the rules surrounding yard sales and garage sales.
Right now, homeowners have to get permission from the HOA before having a sale.
And this question asks if we should just get rid of that requirement altogether.
Which, would give homeowners a lot more freedom. They could have a sale whenever they want.
Exactly. It's about simplifying things and, again, giving homeowners more autonomy.
Of course, some folks might prefer the current system, where the HOA has a little more oversight.
Right. They might like being able to control how often those sales happen, or maybe they just like being in the loop.
That's definitely a trade-off. All right, on to the final ballot question, number 16. This one's about the Architectural Review Committee, or ARC.
The group that's responsible for approving any changes to the exterior of our homes.
And the proposal here is to actually suspend the ARC's approval process for a while.
Yeah, just hit the pause button while they work on developing some clear, objective guidelines.
Because apparently, right now, the process is a little vague.
There aren't any specific written rules. Most requests have been approved historically, but it's all been kind of, case by case.
So this would create a more transparent system. Everyone would know exactly what the rules are.
And once those guidelines are finalized, they would be put to a vote by all the HOA members.
So the homeowners would have the final say.
Which is a pretty big deal. It's about ensuring that the process is fair and equitable for everyone.
Absolutely.